Okay, let's get started. Hello everyone, I'm J.D. Seal and I'm Vice President at Skyview Partners, and I want to welcome you this morning to our session on Cloud Security Review presented by Carol Woodbury. Whether you're a cloud provider or a consumer of cloud technology, this session will apply to you and we hope you will enjoy it. Using a consumer's point of view, Carol will discuss the security considerations you'll want to make when choosing a provider, as well as the security measures you can expect from various types of cloud providers. Also, we'll discuss the types of audits that cloud provider can supply to provide assurances of security and privacy of data. This session is presented by Skyview Partners. It is our Coffee with Carol session where we're happy to make this available to you on a monthly basis. Skyview Partners is the leader in security services and products for IBM I, AIX, and Linux. It is our goal here at Skyview to draw on the unparalleled expertise of our team of experts, which is led by Carol Woodbury, to become a team member for our client's IT group, where we pay attention to the security details so our clients can spend time focused on the other high-value IT activities that contribute directly to your bottom line. Today's presenter is Carol Woodbury, co-founder, president, and CTO of Skyview Partners. Prior to forming Skyview, Carol spent 16 plus years at IBM in positions including Chief Engineering Manager and Security Architect for IBM's Enterprise Server Group. She is an award-winning speaker and acknowledged thought leader on security topics through numerous articles placed in trade publications, and she is the author of the book IBM I Security Administration and Compliance, which is available on MC Press Online. At Skyview Partners, we have a number of solutions that we can help our clients with. Our most exciting new solution is our Managed Security Service, which our clients are very excited about. And if you'd like to hear more about this, I do have a few slides at the end of the session you can stick around for. The Managed Security Service is a monthly offering where critical security administration topics are monitored and then by Skyview, and then you are notified if something needs attention. Reports are created by Skyview and scheduled to run monthly and emailed to Skyview security experts led by Carol for analysis, and if any issues are discovered, you'll be notified. So this pressure truly takes the pressure off you and your IT staff and helps make sure that security is getting regular attention. And again, it is available for I, AIX, and Linux. Skyview still has other security services offerings, including our popular security checkup, diagnostic tool and review, as well as other security improvement services. If you need remediation, we'll help you with that as well. Skyview software solutions still include Skyview Risk Assessor, the diagnostic tool that was the first security software that we made available, and it's still being updated and running strongly on numerous locations all over the world. Skyview Policy Minder is our most popular automated security administration tool. Skyview Audit Journal Reporter, which are predefined auditor-ready reports, which make it very easy for you to get information out of the audit journal. And Policy Minder is also available for open systems. Keep in mind that all Skyview Partner software is available on an unlimited software license if that applies for you. So with that, I want to turn our session over to our presenter this morning, and we're going to have Cloud Security Review presented by Carol Woodbury. Hello, Carol.
Good morning, Judy. Get my screen here. Okay. There we go. Thanks for joining me, everyone. I just wanted to give an update to the cloud security considerations presentation. There's kind of some new developments and new references that I wanted to give you, so I just thought we would do an updated Coffee with Carol on security considerations for the cloud. So the question really is putting everything in the cloud just the answer to everything, and you'll be in nirvana, which is, this is a look at one of my favorite places, which is Maui, or is it the perfect storm? So it's one of those it depends questions, and so we'll go through and see what it depends on throughout this presentation. So there are a lot of you that have already started to use cloud technology And there are certainly benefits to using cloud technology. There's certainly the consolidation of hardware, so you're going to save on not perhaps having to buy your own hardware if it's shared. Then there's the support aspect, and I know a lot of people are concerned about not having the talent that they need to support either the application or the IBM I, or actually whatever piece of hardware or operating system you're running. So you save on those support costs because they are spread amongst all the clients of the cloud provider. You can often save on the software licensing issue as well as software maintenance when you have either a software as a service that you're subscribing to, or putting things in a cloud and having your own software but are sharing hardware and that type of thing. The flip side to the benefits is that you have to, in spite of the savings, you must still meet the requirements of your organization's security policy. So the compliance requirements and the security requirements, the legal requirements surrounding your data don't go away when they're in the cloud. So let's look at some more of those issues. So one of the questions that I get is, well, what is the risk of putting my data in the cloud? And the answer is totally based on the type of data that you have moving to the cloud. So by type of data, I mean, is it private data like credit card numbers or healthcare information, or is it company confidential information, or is it simply a list, a task list, like a project management task list? So depending on the type of data that you have, certainly private data, there's more risk to the private data than there is something that you're just trying to keep track of, or like a team list or a team sandbox, if you will. So the risk goes up with the sensitivity and the value of the data to your organization. The other thing is that there may be other business risks. So if you think about it, what the emphasis of this presentation is on the security risk. It's not really talking about the business risk, meaning the availability of the business of the data, who has access to the data, and that type of thing. It is strictly what we're talking about right now, the security risk. You may have other business risks that you need to consider, but that's not the focus of this presentation. So again, when we think about the type of data, we're thinking about data classification. And a lot of people's eyes glaze over or they switch off when I talk about data classification. So I want to define it in a slightly different way. I'd like you to think of data classification as basically the requirements for maintaining that data. So when I say maintaining the data, it's from a security perspective. So what's the default access? What is it going to be? Deny by default? Is it read-only? Are there encryption requirements that are required for this data? So that would obviously be things like credit card information is required to be encrypted. Are there retention requirements? So most financial information has a retention period of 7 years. Are there storage requirements? Does it have to be easily retrievable for a certain period of time? What's the disposal method? Is it supposed to be shredded? Is it supposed to be just thrown away? What is the disposal method? So all of these types of things make up the requirements associated with certain types of data. So when I say data classification, I don't want it to be this big, huge process, but as you think about what is stored on your IBM I systems, it should kind of fall into at least 2 categories, maybe 3, and it would be the private information that's like the PII, the personally identifiable information, credit card information, bank accounts, email addresses, and then confidential information, which is typically information that is unique to your organization that shouldn't be shared with others, and then data that is probably internal use, but it really doesn't matter if it necessarily gets out in the public domain, or there would be very little damage to your organization if it does. And based on those three types of categories, if you will, these types of requirements for maintaining that data fall out: the default access, the encryption requirements, and so forth. So this is the type of thing that has to be maintained as you move the data to the cloud. These requirements don't change simply because the location of the data or the location of the system holding the data has changed. So, and then of course, there's always the compliance requirements, things like healthcare information. In the EU, there's the EU data privacy directives. There's the PCI requirements and so forth. So all of these things play into what it is that you have to do to maintain this data, so data classification. So again, as I said before, the data classification requirements don't change just because the location of where the data is stored changes. So one of the documents from NIST here in the United States talks about planning on moving information into the cloud and how you can plan for the use of cloud providers. So of course, they're talking about planning the security and privacy of the solution before engaging the cloud provider. This is critical. If you have already made arrangements with the cloud provider and already are using their services, it's very unlikely that you will get any changes to that contract. So of course, it's best to do this before you engage them and before you move to the cloud. The other thing is that you have, so when you are choosing a cloud provider, there is some due diligence that you need to do on your own, which is things like understanding the public cloud computing environment that is provided by the provider. So the thing that you will want to be looking at are things like whether the solution that is provided actually, number one, meets your business needs, but that it also satisfies the security and privacy requirements of your data, so that data classification requirement. And also that their side, so not just the requirements that you have, but do they have their own security and privacy requirements, and are they following them? The other thing about the consideration before moving to the cloud provider is that you have to maintain some type of accountability over this whole security and privacy emphasis. So the other consideration that you'll want to make is, how are you going to maintain that accountability? How are you going to monitor them? Who's going to be responsible for the reporting and that type of thing? So there is, again, due diligence on your part for the security provider, or rather the cloud provider, to make sure that they are meeting the security and privacy needs, both from your perspective as well as following their own requirements. So obviously the key to success is to gather your organization's requirements before moving and make sure that those terms and conditions are to your specifications and to your requirements prior to signing the deal. Unfortunately, you may be planning to move to the cloud, but it is highly likely that some of your organization's employees already are using cloud services. They may be using Google Docs, they may be using something like Dropbox. So whether you have a policy on using the cloud or not, it's quite likely it's already in use. So what do you do about that? Do you just throw up your hands and say, well, there's cats out of the bag, I can't do anything about this, it's already in use, I would suggest otherwise. I would suggest that you want to find out what is in use. And when you do that, don't forget about the cloud services that are in use from the mobile perspective. The bring your own device has certainly driven the use of cloud services. If you're using an iPhone, a lot of people back up to the iCloud. If they're using their own device, and you don't do anything to control what is on that device, your business information may be in iCloud. Okay, so the use of the cloud is probably already there, whether you necessarily want it to be or not. So from the business side of business, rather than IT, but from the business perspective, you want to understand what cloud services are already in use. So if people are using Google Docs for a to-do list or a project management type list, that would be an example. If people are backing up to iCloud, that would be another one. If people are using Dropbox or some sort of file sharing service, that would be another one. So from the business side, understand what cloud services are already in use, and then determine if they meet your organization's requirements or not. Now, they might, depending on what type of data is being put in those services. For example, I use Google Docs as a to-do list for the development team. So we have a common place that we can go. We know what the outstanding issues are, and it's just an easy way to do that since our developers are not all located in one location. So easy way to communicate. Now, it has nothing company confidential in that list, so using Google Docs for that type of thing, it's okay. Now, if I was to have our 7-year plan out there and company confidential information, probably not so much. So again, it depends on that type of data that's being put out there. So if those services that are being used do not comply with your security requirements, then I would propose that it's up to you to find something that works for the business community. Because let's face it, business drives the organization, and they may do what they want to do regardless. So if you just say stop using Dropbox and don't provide them with another alternative, chances are they may continue to use Dropbox. So investigate the alternatives, find something that meets their needs, and then help them understand from an education perspective, help them understand why using one service versus another is not appropriate, and okay, here we're going to do this over here. They may need some education on the various compliance requirements, things that the organization is audited on, the concerns about legal requirements and so forth. And then with management buy-in and management perspective on that, you can rein in, if you will, the use of cloud services. And with cooperation from the business, you can get a handle and use cloud, the general public cloud, when it's appropriate. So the compliance requirements that you're going to want to think about are encryption. Again, is the data encrypted? Think of software as a service. Think of something like, a payroll like ADP. You know, are they encrypting the data that is in their software as a service application? What kind of logging do they do? So logging from an application perspective as well as logging from an operational perspective. And so what this slide is trying to do is list out the various compliance requirements that you might have or that you're audited against, and those are the same requirements that are going to have to be levied when you move into the cloud. So things like access controls, and how do you get reports on the access controls? What type of reporting are you going to get back? Are you going to get back reports of invalid sign-on attempts, for example. If that's something your auditors are looking for, is that a report that you'll be able to generate once you get into the cloud? Incident response handling, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. Monitoring, so monitoring at the network level, monitoring for both distributed denial of service attacks and that sort of thing. So I would encourage you to talk to your auditor and or your QSA if you have to be part of the payment card industry. You have a QSA that will come and audit your configuration. I would recommend that if it affects the data that they audit, that either of those two entities audit, that you talk with them before you move to the cloud to see what their concerns are and see what their recommendations are. And that way you don't have to be surprised at the audit. So the main thing that they will be looking at, in addition to the compliance requirements, is whether or not they can still get the information and or do the testing that they need. So there are some audit organizations that will come in and do like a penetration testing, or they will try to break into various servers, right, with password attacks and that type of thing. If you're in a cloud situation and you are on a shared server, there's no way your cloud provider is going to let you do a penetration testing, because you're not only affecting you, you're affecting all the clients on that server. So the cloud provider is going to put strict requirements on what type of tests can be run against that server. So if that's going to be a problem for the auditor, you would want to know that ahead of time and figure out how to resolve that issue before being surprised at audit time. So then there's the legal requirements associated with moving data to the cloud. One of them is where the data is physically located. And this, more than in the United States, this comes into play in the European Union, where there's actual requirements and regulations about where, meaning which country or countries, the data can or cannot reside. And so you're going to want to make sure that you understand that. There's actually cloud providers popping up in the EU that serve only EU data and will not be redundant around the world because of the EU Data Protection Directive. The other thing is that if the data is deleted, so a lot of organizations will have a retention period, and after that time, the data needs to be deleted. Well, in the cloud world, the data is replicated often literally around the world. So if the data is actually deleted, is it deleted off of all the servers, or is there kind of remnant data left over? And if you leave the cloud provider, what is the assurance that all your data is gone and can't be picked up by a new client when you have when you're installed in one of their servers? So, you know, how do they deal with taking down virtual machines, and how do they assure that the data is gone? And another thing along these lines, sometimes there's requirements both in the U.S. and in the EU about erasing disk when certain messages of certain sensitivity are written out to disk. They need to be overwritten, and this is typically in the government sector, but they need to be overwritten a certain number of times so that they can't be read. Is that possible to do in the cloud environment? So again, these are the things to think about before you move that type of data to the cloud. Another thing is incident response handling. Okay, so before you sign the contract, you'll want to understand what the cloud provider's definition of a breach is, as well as your definition of a breach or an incident, not necessarily just a breach, but an incident, and make sure that they agree so that you can have a clear understanding of what constitutes an incident. And then you'll want to define who's in charge of investigating the breach, who takes control over that whole incident, who's responsible for it. And the other thing is what happens to your data in the event another client of the provider is breached. So if you think about it, if in most cases when somebody is breached, one of the methods of investigating a breach, or if there's illegal activity associated with a customer, a lot of times there will be a search warrant and the server is taken off the premises and walked out the door. Well, in a cloud providing environment, that's not going to happen because there may be 30 other customers running on a particular physical server because of all the virtual machines on there. So, if somebody in the cloud providing ecosystem that you're using gets breached or they have a legal issue, what happens to your data if that happens? Okay, you need to understand that before you sign up with a cloud provider. So the other thing that you'll need to think through are your service level agreements, your SLAs. So if for some reason the information in the cloud provider network is not available, will you be able to fulfill your SLAs in this cloud computing environment? So think of the SLAs associated with the data that you want to move to the cloud and see if your SLAs can continue to be fulfilled, and think of some scenarios where they might not be able to be fulfilled and think of the workarounds for those situations. And as well as the compliance requirements associated with all this data. Some of the questions specifically that you'll want to add the cloud provider about their specific practices, so about their specific security practices. So someone has to sign on to the hardware, typically at a console or some sort of HMC or some sort of hypervisor. Somebody is going to have to sign on with a lot of power because there are just times when that's required. So who do they give that power to? Is it to everyone? Do they use shared profiles for that? Is that activity logged? How is it logged? Can you get access to those logs? Do the administrators access the system via encrypted sessions? I would add another one to this list of what is their security policy about looking at their customers' data. Hopefully it's something like immediate dismissal if it's discovered. What's the patch management? What kind of antivirus and malware software is used? Who audits them? Can you see the results of the last audit? That type of thing. So there are a whole raft of questions that you'll want to add. Again, this is hopefully starting to make you think about those types of questions. You probably have some others that are very specific to your organization. Another one is user management. So what's the process that you have to be able to remove users from accessing the data in the cloud? So typically today, there is a integrated process between IT and application administrators and that type of thing, such that if someone is dismissed from the organization, they are disconnected from all of the system resources. So their network access comes down, their IBM I profile gets deleted or at least disabled, they're removed from any kind of Active Directory and so forth. Well, what is the process of removing them from access to the data in the cloud? And what is the response time? So is it immediate? Is it 3 days? Is it, what kind of practices can you expect from the cloud provider in those services? So obviously, you have within your control access to your own network. You may not have that kind of control when you move that data to the cloud. Another one about the provider practices is logging. So do they log and examine the invalid sign-on attempts to the servers? Do they do the logging for changes in access to PCI or HIPAA data? Do they have access attempts to the data? You know, what is their log retention schedule? Is anybody reviewing those logs? Also at the network level, don't just focus on data that you're moving off of IBM I to the cloud, but what kind of logging do they have at the network level as well? Now, one thing to make yourself aware of is that because cloud providers hold so much data, and especially if they're a specialized cloud provider, and we'll talk about that in a few slides, they hold so much data they may be the victim of a targeted attack. And that's one of the types of attacks these days that is becoming more and more prevalent, is a targeted attack. So a targeted attack is not, let me back up, a hacker, especially somebody who's just trying to kind of prove their worth and, hey, have bragging rights type of thing. They may just go out on the internet and see who they can get to. And the first one they can break into, they break into and leave a cookie or they leave a crumb to prove that they actually did this. But that's more of a drive-by, okay? They just go and see who's vulnerable and they go in, but it's not targeted. They haven't done it with a purpose. They're just trying to prove that they can. So a targeted attack is just what it says. Someone is very purposefully trying to break into a network or a set of systems, and it's typically one of two things. It's typically for the value of the data that is there, and so they want to get at that data, or it's a targeted attack for to embarrass them politically, or it's a targeted attack to somehow discredit or bring down a competitor. And all three of those types of attacks are on the rise, okay? So while the cloud provider may be a victim of that type of attack, they, unlike all the rest of us, typically have a lot more people power looking for that type of attack, okay? So they have spent a lot of money with network monitoring software that will look for both a hacking attempt as well as the distributed denial of service attacks. And along with that software, they have the trained personnel to recognize and respond to the attack and how to limit or prevent it. So while they may be more of a target, they typically know how better to respond and are able to respond to it than a single organization. So when you go to look at the contract with a cloud provider, there are several things that you'll want to look at, several factors, and this is just a list of them. It came from an IBM white paper. I've listed the URL here, and yes, there will be handouts available for this so that you can, you don't have to write down this URL, but things like your business level objectives, your business continuity and disaster recovery requirements, redundancy, what is the maintenance schedule for both hardware, software, patches, that type of thing, the data location, what happens in the case of data seizure, what happens in case the provider fails. So what if your cloud provider goes financially under or is indicted and is closed down or something? What happens then to your data? So all these things are factors that you will want to have written into your service level agreement. And then some requirements from your perspective that you will want to feed into and have part of that service level agreement with the cloud provider are things like your security requirements, the encryption requirements, privacy requirements. And again, in the EU, the privacy requirements are becoming much more stringent. The EU, last month, I believe it was, committed to strengthening the privacy requirements for data being retained. So there's a lot of privacy requirements, things like your monitoring requirements, auditability, What kind of reports are you going to be able to get out of this, and so forth. So all of these are the types of things that you will want to make sure and feed into that contract. So really, when it comes to deciding whether or not to move into the cloud, the thing that you have to do is determine what your organization's security and compliance requirements are for the type of data going into the cloud. You have to define the service level agreements that must be in place, and terminology and communication is key. You have to agree on the definition of all of those things that we've just been talking about. Agree to the service level objectives so that you can monitor the results. And terms and conditions are key. So again, the more private or more specialized the cloud provider you're going to, the more you will be able to monitor and alter the terms and conditions. So if I was to try to go to Google and say, hey, yo, when I use my Google Docs spreadsheet, I want this one column to be encrypted, they're just going to laugh at me. But if you are going to a specialized cloud provider, there will be a totally different response. Now, you're going to have to pay significantly more than I pay for my Google Docs spreadsheet, but it will meet your requirements. Okay. So find your private and confidential data before you move to the cloud. Now, so I've had people just say, well, we're just going to move our SQL servers to the cloud and just serve them off cloud providers. Well, that's great, but do you know what kind of data is on those servers? Because your IBM I might be the system of record for data, but that data often moves a lot of various places. So don't just assume that you have benign reports on servers that are going into the cloud. You're going to want to make sure that you don't have confidential data and either remove it or up the requirements for the cloud provider to be able to move that data securely. So I've alluded to, but haven't really talked about, these things called private clouds. There are a lot of organizations that are now moving into something called a private cloud. Basically, it's the consolidation of the data center. So in my lifetime, I've seen data center consolidation. I've seen it go out to the organizations. I've seen it come back. So now it's coming back, and it's being called a private cloud. So basically, again, just think of it as data center consolidation. So you have 5 units, and they used to all have their own data center, and now they're being consolidated into one. But the difference between the private cloud and the public cloud is that the private cloud is still being run by the organization. So it's not going to a third-party cloud provider. Somebody else might manage it for them, but the cloud is under the jurisdiction totally of the organization. Okay. So the benefits are still the same as going to the public cloud: reduced hardware, software costs, quicker patching, you have the consolidated expertise, you have monitoring through a NOC, consolidated logging across your entire organization so you can correlate events easier, and typically more layers of security. So that's a private cloud. Then you have this thing called a specialized cloud, and again, you're seeing more and more of these. And these are organizations that are specializing in typically a specific area of data. So either credit card information, or you see healthcare information having specialized clouds. So these specialized clouds are usually quite expensive, but they're specialized for a reason, and they are there to take care of your privacy and security needs and compliance needs according to the type of data that you're putting there. So again, significantly more expensive, but it's typically a complete solution for that type of data. Service providers have been providing cloud services for many years. So when I say service providers, there have been organizations that have been hosting J.D. Edwards clients, government sector clients, Lawson clients. There are a lot of providers that host small organizations' data, actually not just small, large organizations' data on their hardware. So they have a data center, and they may range from a handful of clients to several hundred. So this has been happening for a long time. It's just not been called cloud services. But they are, if you would think of them now as being more of a cloud, they would fall under the private or specialized cloud category. Okay, so again, if you are considering something like this, basically an application, somebody who is allows you to host your application on their system, whether they call themselves a cloud provider or a service provider, the security, compliance, and legal requirements are exactly the same as what we've all been talking about. Now, there's quite a few resources out there for cloud security, and that is really what has been updated in this case. So the Cloud Security Alliance actually originated here in Seattle, and I've been fortunate to be in Seattle with this organization. They have monthly meetings, and so I've been able to go to some of those and hear some of the topics. Really interesting on the forensic front. That was one of the meetings 1 month, talking about how cloud providers, it's just not that easy to do forensics when there is a breach, or they have to be a lot more creative when they go to investigate the breach because of the number of clients that are on a piece of hardware. So again, you can't just pick up the hardware and leave because you will affect 30 different clients. And some of the things that you might have been able to do, like scan the entire disk, you can't do because of privacy requirements, because only one of the clients was breached, not all 30 of them. So really kind of an interesting thing. But so that's the type of education that they provide. But they are a worldwide organization with several locations around the world, actually. So they have provided documentation. They have a knowledge base on cloud security information. So they have a cloud controls matrix that allows a cloud provider to, you to fill in the blank to find out what pieces of security and the whole compliance and auditability factors what a cloud provider actually provides. And then there's an open certification framework that the cloud provider themselves can use to make sure that they are in compliance and can be audited. There's cloud computing guidance from NIST, the National Institute of Standards. There's cloud computing guidance from the INSA. It's the European Union Agency for Network and Information Security, counterpart to NIST, if you will. The PCI Council put out a specific paper about the cloud. Now, it was based on version 2 of the PCI DSS. Version 3 came out last November, so I would assume that at some point they may be going to update that document, but it's still worth a read for any of you that are thinking about moving PCI data to the cloud. There's articles from the SANS organization as well as ISACA. And then if you're in Europe or you have data that might be out of Europe, I would encourage you to search for the words European Cloud Computing Strategy, and that will bring up a whole raft of articles from that perspective as well. So there are a lot of resources out there. That wasn't the case a couple years ago, but there's a lot of guidance out there and a lot of resources out there to make sure that moving data to the cloud is done correctly and securely. So with that, I'll turn it back over to JD. And certainly if you want more information on this topic or the topics that JD is about to talk about, you can certainly contact us. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you, Carol. A great presentation. Again, the presentation is being recorded and the handouts will be available. You'll get an email in a couple hours. If you're watching the recorded version of this, you can contact us at skyviewpartners.com and we'll be happy to get those things out to you. Like I mentioned in our preview, I do have a couple of slides on our new Skyview Managed Security Services. It's going over very well. We've got a lot of clients that are very excited about this. And so if you haven't heard about this, I'd encourage you to stay and take a look. If you have heard a little, maybe we can show you a little bit more right here as well. So what we're hearing from our clients is that they just don't have time or enough time for security. So with Skyview Managed Security Services, you truly let the experts here at Skyview, led by Carol, pay attention to your key security indicators for you. And just think about that. Have Skyview analyzing, summarizing, and reporting back to you. So you only need to know the summary of the issues and truly looking at a report provided by experts that are giving you an indication on a monthly basis of the things that you want to be taking a look at. You have that peace of mind that someone is actually doing it on a monthly basis and that it is getting done. Again, it is available for IBM I, AIX, and Linux. So if you have any or all of those operating systems, take a look at this. So what Managed Security Services is a monthly offering where critical security administration topics are monitored and you're notified if something needs attention. So it's as simple as that. All of the reports are created by Skyview, so we do the work to create the reports. The reports are scheduled to run. We do the scheduling and have the reports emailed to our security experts, again led by Carol Woodbury, for analysis, and if any issues are discovered, you're notified. So it's as simple as that. It truly takes the pressure off your IT staff and helps make sure that security is getting regular attention. Real briefly, and this is real briefly, this is how it works. First thing is, with Managed Security Services, you'll get a comprehensive third-party risk assessment. This is actually what we do at the beginning of the year, and we'll do this on an annual basis going forward. So we'll have you run some reports, send them to Skyview. We'll review the reports, go over them with you, and that'll set a basis for analyzing where all your risk is. And what reports you need to be aware of. Then Skyview will build reports. Up to 10 key security indicator reports are scheduled to electronically be sent to Skyview, and after analyzing these reports, Skyview delivers a monthly summary, a Word document. Easy to read, easy to understand, easy to share with management, auditors, or whomever. And you'll get that on a regular basis, and you have that defined process in place, which is generally a huge plus to your auditors. So let me just share a few things. We love to hear these kind of things from our clients, and this is actual input from our clients. Couldn't be happier with Skyview Managed Security Services. This particular client is the only administrator of the IBM I, and he's not a security expert. So to have this monthly monitoring by an expert was truly worth it. And relative ranges of security expert I know are out there. The beauty of this is having Carol and the Skyview security experts giving you that level of expertise that you can get from Skyview. Another client, pricing was such it was a no-brainer for us. With the monthly feedback report from Carol, it's very simple to go in, correct the risks that have cropped up. So hopefully it's the same when you see it. I think you'll be very impressed with the pricing strategy that's out there. Again, these are reports on a monthly basis, and so we've built the pricing accordingly. Encourage you, if you haven't seen it, to contact Skyview. And the final one here, with Managed Security Services, it's truly one less thing I have to actively manage. If there's something they're not clear on, Skyview is just an email away, and that's true for all of our clients, but especially for the clients of Managed Security Service. So the big question is, could you benefit from having a person of Carol Woodbury's caliber on your security team? I think the answer for most of you, if not literally all of you, is that yes, you could benefit from it. I'd love to have the opportunity to discuss how you could benefit from it and how we could get you going on that right away. So if you have any interest in that, please come to our website. We have a fact sheet, some other information out there, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you, share with you some of the sample reports, walk you through how this gives you that expertise, as well as provide you with a services contract so you can see the details of how it works. So thank you for your time this morning. Carol, thank you for a great presentation. And with that,